And welcome to what we call the Wise Crowds design call. What we're going to do is run through the Wise Crowds peer-to-peer consultation format a couple times together and give and get some help with whatever help requests we've got here in the room. Who is unfamiliar with Wise Crowds? Excellent. Does anybody who is familiar with Wise Crowds want to onboard everybody who's not familiar with Wise Crowds? All right. Sherry's going for it. Excellent. Cool. So Sherry is very often bandwidth challenged. So Sherry might use the chat to give us a breakdown of how Wise Crowds goes. She says, so for Wise Crowds, we have several phases. First, the person debriefs on a problem or help request. And then second, the rest of us will ask some clarifying questions to the person who needs help.
Zoom is like missing the ... typing.
Well, there you go. That's a good feature. And third, the person who needs help will turn off their camera while the rest of us gives advice that the person can hear. Also, the person does not go away because it's important to hear the advice. That's sage clarification there. And then fourth, after the consultation, the person turns their camera back on and discusses their takeaways. Amen. And so we will more or less try and stick to about 2 minutes for that initial help request, 3 or so minutes for those clarifying questions, 8 to 10 minutes for consultation, and just a couple minutes for that takeaway. And then we'll rotate and give another client the opportunity to go. So does anybody have questions about that procedure and how that will work? All right. And then the question lands to who's got a help request or a design brief, as we like to call them.
I don't mind bringing something.
Awesome, Rob. Yep, get us.
So this is where I debrief on the problem or the help request.
Yeah, just give us your question, your situation, your challenge, and we'll take it from there.
All right. So I'm an agile coach in an organization. I have been asked to step into a consultant stance in a separate organization within my company. The problem this organization is trying to solve is a change management problem. They are trying to move from working in a traditional product way to a more omni-channel type of organization. there's two problems they're trying to solve. The first is they have this concept of, when you think of omnichannel, think of it as journeys, a client experience journey. It's not necessarily a client or a user interacting with a product, but they are interacting with a series of products as they navigate through a journey within our company. So they've created this role called journey owner. And again, think of journey, omnichannel is the same. This journey owner is responsible for an end-to-end client experience. And within that client experience, it could be multiple products. So bringing the organization to understand the responsibility of the new journey owner role is number one. The second problem that's trying to be solved is to help the organization understand the concept of journey, right? So break down the existing silos that are like product verticals. So you break those down, and now you're trying to facilitate a new way of working that's within these journeys. Now, that's some background. Again, the problem I'm trying to solve is I was asked to come in and work with two other people to facilitate the change management needed to help the organization understand the journey owner role and the concept of journeys. So I'll pause there. Hopefully that laid out the problem statement.
Yeah, clarifying questions. And this is open to anybody in the group. You know, what do we want to know more about?
Yeah, Rob, why is that a problem for you?
That's a great question. So the reason why I'm bringing it to all of you today is I thought change management means different things to different people. I have, through my research and my experiences as a coach, have some ideas of like what change management, through my consulting stance in this problem, I have an idea of like what change management might look like. And so I thought to ask the group here, if you were in this situation, what kind of framework or what first steps do you feel like you would take to more effectively begin a change management initiative? So that's the problem I'm trying to solve, is like come up with some new ideas, new thoughts, ideas from people who have been through this, who have seen what good looks like.
I have a question. Are you aware of the PROCE change management process?
So for the problems I'm trying to solve, and that there's no existing change management processes, there's just, here are two people in the organization that are, quote, responsible for bringing the change management. And I have been brought in as a sort of an agile coach with this experience, but in a consulting stance. So I don't have any responsibility for it. I'm here to consult and help these people with their change management initiative.
Yeah, okay. So the question I asked was, are you aware of the standard steps in the PROCE change management process? That was what I was wondering.
Okay, thank you, Annette. I do have, yeah, so I have subscribed to the Dr. John Kotter framework of leading change, which is essentially, you know, laying out a vision and building a coalition.
Yep. Yep.
You know, getting people involved, making it a collaborative effort rather than just like inflicting change on people. So I do have an idea of like good best practices or effective practices, I should say. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just yeah, because when I think about the steps, and
this is an interesting liminal space. I can feel this weird boundary that we're in, sort of, Annette. If I can ask you to just hold on for the consultation.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about. I'm thinking about for the different steps, different things one could be doing in those different steps, and how that could be interesting and engaging. That's how I'm going, but I'm going to stop. Yeah, I'll shut up.
Yeah, no worries. We all want to get to advice immediately. Kathy, it looks like you got a question.
I'm curious, what conversations have you had with the two change management people at the organization? What problems have they shared? What have you tried already to find out what's in process and where they're stuck?
Yeah, good question, Kathy. So I've had 3 conversations already with the 2 people, and it was really around, like, tell me about the history. How did we get here? Who are the people involved? What does our relationship and our partnership with the 2 leaders in the organization look like? Do we know the difference between alignment and commitment? Right? So it seems like the leaderships are aligned to the change, but the commitment around, for example, providing the necessary people, the other resources, tools, what have you needed to bring about the change is not yet there. So I've had conversations around, what does that relationship and partnership with leadership look like? What is the difference between them saying, yep, we are going to do this change and we're going to become a omni-channel journey-led organization, but we can't necessarily give you all the people that you need to make this happen. So trying to understand the history, the partnership of leadership, what the current state looks like, right? What happened last year when they tried to bring this change management initiative before and it failed? What happened? Do we have any insights into, like, can we use that failure as seeds to plant in this new this new endeavor, right? So I spent 2 or 3 hours with them, really understanding a lot of the history and the current state.
A question that pops up is, I'm gonna park the question on why they're doing this thing in the first place, because I mean that's not that's very interesting, but I'm more interested in whose participation do you need more of to be successful, you think, in not only delivering your advice, but the change itself.
So real quick, Jeremy, the why is because the organization is operating in very, very archaic and old ways of working, which is making the client experience suffer. And you're dealing with, like, millions and millions and millions of dollars tied up in a really good experience. So it's just a recognition that they're way behind their competitors in terms of client experience. The second thing is relates to your primary question. I just went blank. Could you repeat that again, Jeremy?
Yeah, whose participation do you think you'll need to be successful in both offering your advice or consultation, as well as the ultimate change?
I believe very, very deeply that you have to get the people who are going to be affected by the change to be brought to the table to participate in the change. So that is the people leadership, that is marketing, it's the client facing groups, it's everybody across the journey who's going to be affected by this change, so they feel like they're a participant, as opposed to the old way of, like, just pushing this out and saying everybody go change, which typically results in a lot of resistance. So that, people across the organization impacted by the change, I think, is the short answer.
Well, any additional clarifying questions?
Who or where do you think are you sensing is going to be the most resistance?
That's a good question. So I don't know, but if I were sensing it, it would be, there's two departments within an organization that are doing very similar things. So you have like 6 Sigma black belts that are there to help improve processes, that are also claiming that they are responsible for client experience change. Whereas the group that I'm working with are the client experience change group. And so there's this tension of like, who's getting the credit for this and who's really responsible for this. So I would say, if I'm sensing it, those would be 2 groups that we have to bring to the table as part of this coalition to make this thing even remotely chance of successful.
It looks like Sherry's got some questions in the chat. Who are the people involved in the journey?
It's hard to really say because I'm still learning the organization myself, at least the part of the org that I'm working with. But I would say it is people who are in marketing, people who are responsible for client facing. So they interact one-on-one with the clients, our customers. Clients, customers are used synonymously. You have relationship managers, but then internally, you have technology groups that are responsible for products that clients use or internal stakeholders use to help with client requests. So you have product groups that are involved in journeys as well.
Let's see. Is there any other questions, Sherry? Looks like we're there. All right. Well, Rob.
Sorry, I do have a follow-up question.
Okay.
Is it unusual in a company to have, or is it standard procedure to have 2 people who are ultimately responsible in rolling out such a big change that ultimately the success of it is like on 2 people's shoulders rather than 1 person? Is that normal?
So last year, Susan, they had what was called a client success program, which was a group. Think of it as like a program management group that was responsible for just change management in general. That group collapsed for reasons I haven't figured out yet. But one of the things they were supposed to do is facilitate the change into these new journeys. Since that client success group collapsed, now the onus is on a couple of people that were in program management to be the face of the change, to be accountable for the change related to the journeys. I think in the absence of having like a group, like client success group last year, and I said, it's funny, I said this on Friday to these 2 people. I said, you need to build a coalition. If you're not going to have a group, then you need to build a coalition of the people who are going to be impacted by the change. And that's going to be your change management group. It's not going to be a group of people telling everybody what change is, but you're going to bring the people impacted by the change together, and y'all are going to figure it out together. And that's what we're going to experiment with and see we can make that work. It's I don't think it's common. I think it's a lot on 2 people's shoulders. But let's start to really get strategic about it and figure out, can we experiment our way to success? And experimentation is another principle that I brought to the table.
And looks like Kathy's got one final one. This will be our last question, and we'll get into consultation.
So what's the duration of your engagement with the organization? Like how long are you going to be there? And what are you excited about in this challenge? What's the growth and the exciting thing for you?
So I don't know how long I'll be in this. Some of my coaching of my product teams, my day job, is a little light right now. So I'm stepping in here for the foreseeable future to see if I can make an impact. I think what excites me is I know we can do this because we do have leadership partnership. Even though leadership hasn't done everything that our journey owners have needed, I still believe that that's the most important thing, that we have leadership support, enough leadership support to give me confidence that we could start to build some momentum. And then when we see that there's momentum, and then we can demonstrate that we're making progress, we're hitting some outcomes, we might get more support. And we could end up getting the additional resources that some people are claiming that we need. But I think we just need to prove it first. I don't think it's impossible. I just think you just need to, I think it's impossible. So I think that's what's exciting.
And it looks like Sherry's got the mate of that question. What are you dreading? And that's the last question. I swear to God, so help me.
Yeah. I think I'm dreading that this just falls into like a black hole, and that you're spinning around like a hamster in a cage, a hamster wheel, because leadership, while they're saying, so it goes back to alignment versus commitment. I want to make sure that we're not just in alignment with them, but that we are committed, which means that if we need something or that we have blockers or we're impeded, the leadership partnership is there to help us break down those impediments so that we can continue to move forward. You know, that's what I'm dreading, is, you know, that we don't have that support.
All right. Well, Rob, I'll invite you to turn off your webcam and microphone, but importantly, listen while we offer consultation. So the question is, what's the advice for the consultation? And if I could encourage everybody to think consultation through the lens of what are the liberating structures that we might use to help address this help request, and how might we connect them to one another? So with that being said, what do we got, group?
Well, the first one that comes to mind with me is purpose to practice, which is kind of what I would say an overall project structure. And so what I'm sensing here is that the purpose is not really clear with this group. So additionally, you know, within the purpose to practice framework, I would say start with a 9 whys thing, and then well, that's how far, you know, that's my first inclination.
Thank you.
When I was in a similar situation before, where I had inherited a problem and there was a long history before I got there, and I didn't know what it was, I met with people and did appreciative interviews with them, and that's I would find it very interesting to do appreciative interviews with the 2 change management people who are there right now. And then I always ended my appreciative interviews with, who else should I talk to? And I would do more with them. Now, as a consultant, I would imagine you have to be mindful of your time, so figure out how many you're going to do. But I feel like there's a lot of interesting things to learn. And with the appreciative interviews, it'd be asking, you know, it's a looking at positive questioning techniques. So asking, what would you have, like I had people who didn't know that we had documentation on something, and I would ask them, so if you had known, how would you have found out? And I was able to discover some new ways that we could share information. So just asking questions of, you know, well, if things did work, what would have been different? Asking from that positive mindset, I think that was really helpful to me. So hope that's useful.
Thank you. Anybody else? And by the way, I don't, for the love of God, want to do this like conversation manager thing. So feel free to like take yourself off mute and just go weapons hot. I mean, one of the things that jumped out to me was, especially around this interesting frame around alignment versus commitment, is like the greatest hits, like Triz. Like, so, all right, how do we turn this thing into a total cluster? Like an absolute shit show of resistance, quagmire, and putting out the wrong type of fires, just to bring that negative design space into very clear. Around change as well, I think this is also an interesting space for two structures. I mean, EcoCycle, I would say, is hands down, like, other than 1, 2, 4 all, like I would throw everything at the EcoCycle. It's just a really powerful sense making frame. And also, I think, given this sort of point that keeps coming up around alignment, commitment, do we have everybody on board? Do we get what we're on about? I think the agreement certainty matrix might be a really good way of sort of guiding the discussion to figure out what kind of change we're dealing with. So yeah, just to have that conversation. Are we in a complicated, like, let's analyze this thing to death and then start implementing, or to the point that Rob brought in, are we in a complex environment in which we might want to sort of experiment, probe, sense, and respond our way? Could somebody tell me what ProSci means? ProSci. I have not heard that.
Okay, so ProSci it's kind of like a group that does change management. They have a number of steps that are called, the terms are ADCAR. So A, you build awareness of the need for the change and the rationale behind it. And then you create D, the desire for people to want change. And then you teach them the knowledge how to do the change. And then you give them, I think it was, I forgot what the second A is. You give them opportunities to integrate it and build their ability. That's it, build the muscles to do the new behavior. So they're learning a new behavior. They've got it they integrate it into physically doing it, rather than just intellectually understanding how it's supposed to be done. And then the R is repetition, repetition, repetition. That's the process that they go through. And that's basically what we do with a lot of our systems, our technical solutions, is take people on that journey to understand the need for a new technical solution. So that's why I mentioned it. Thank you. And there's going to be loads of wonderful things you can do along that journey with the people you're taking along that journey. Yeah, but I can hear that the thing you've got most of a problem with is getting clarity on the desire for this and the commitment behind it. That's going to mean you're going to get the resources you require. Yeah, that sounds like a real challenge.
Yeah, there are multiple change management models, and ProSci is the one that I hear about the most as well. And I would want to know what change management model they were following before, and probably not change that up. But if they're not following a specific model, then ProSci has tons of great tools that give you data and visuals that you're able to show people, like, this is this is the landscape. This is how many people we have who are not aware that we're doing this yet, and this is the number of people who don't have the knowledge that they need or don't have the skills, and just really helps you address where you are and bring everyone forward. So if you have a budget and you don't have a model yet, I would definitely look at that.
And what do we got, Jerry? That cover it for you. What? So what now? What?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, my experience actually with this change management is that most of the time it's a lack of reflective capacity that people. It's not, you know, it's not a coincidence that change is needed, and probably people were kind of missing things because they were not, how to say, reflecting on what they're doing, not being mindful. So I think anyway you can bring in this W3 would be good, even if you're doing, you know, your first meeting with these people, you know, reserve like, you know, at least 1 hour to reflection of everything you do, because I think that will give you most of the new insights to bring it further. And building on that, I would build your program very iteratively. So like, you know, every time you have a meeting with them, you know, sense what's going on, and then based on that, prepare your next step, and then prepare the next step, and prepare the next step.
There's also a through line. Thanks, Marco, by the way. There's also a liner that I think is interesting. I like to think about the strategy not working, the adaptive strategy sort of not working. The suite here in Liberating Structures sort of weaves through 6 questions. What's the fundamental justification through the existence of our work? You know, what's happening around us that requires creative change, to the questions that Annette brought up. What's the baseline? Where are we actually? What actions make sense? The sort of path questions, and how is it that we move towards our intended outcome, sensing what's possible as we go there. And especially that second one, what's happening around us that requires creative change. 2 structures pop out for that question that might be particularly helpful for you. One is wicked questions, just because wicked questions are the bomb, right? So, you know, finding that polarity of 2 things that we want to get, like we're, you know, maybe whatever those 2 things are for this context, to like really clearly articulate that paradox, and then wrestle with it with something like integrated autonomy. Just very basic, you know, how do we get A and Z, and what are the things in between both A and Z that we might be able to use. So that's one sort of set of structures. And the other thing that jumps out at me is critical uncertainties, which you can relate to wicked questions, but critical uncertainties just asks to identify the sort of most critical factor, whether that's as an organization or towards your change management process. Both could be interesting. And what's the most uncertain factor? And based on those 2 dimensions, you create a 2x2 matrix, and then do some scenario planning around those 4 different situations that you might find yourself in. So to make this a little more concrete, because I think it's always a little tricky, if you find out the critical element is, like you said, well, let's just go with what you offered earlier, you know, so both alignment and commitment. So you might have lots of alignment. You would have one quadrant that's lots of alignment, lots of commitment, your happy flow, you know, one where there's lots of alignment and little commitment, one where there's little commitment and little alignment, and then one where there's little commitment. I don't know the other one. So thinking about sketching out those scenarios and fleshing them out, and then sort of developing coping strategies is the way the structure most often goes. There's a method called foresight, which also asks, okay, which one of those scenarios do we think we're in? Which one would we like to be in? What might be the set of actions that we could do that could get us from where we're at to where we'd like to be in order to get started. So those are the stuff that jump out to me. Does anybody have any additional recommendations or stuff that pops out? Or should we ask Rob to come back?
While you were describing that, it made me think of eco cycles, which was an interesting one that I experimented with recently. And so like identifying what are the different processes that we have going right now that are in the beginning stage and maturing, and then what do we need to destroy, and what are there's a lot of interesting questions that you can ask around eco cycles through this, and then also doing minimum specs, because once you do that, you're gonna have a ton of stuff. So maybe doing min specs after that to narrow down the word isn't coming to me, but what are the fewest things we need to do to really make it, to get started, to make a change.
Excellent. Cool. So Rob, we've given you a whole bunch of stuff. What of that consultation that you've heard do you think, oh yeah, that one seems sticky, I might give that one a go?
There's a few things that jumped out to me, but I think the one thing that really has me, spinning cycles is the appreciative interviews. I think I need to deep dive a little bit more into that and look at, because there is some morale issues right now because of, there's been some trying and some failing that's happened. There's some resistance from the people who don't want to give up their silos and break down walls. So I think appreciative interviews is one thing. There's one other thing up in the chat. I need to get into the prosi. How's that pronounced? I don't know how to pronounce it. Prosi. Okay, thank you.
They have a lot of stuff online. You can quickly give them a look. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are the two takeaways. I do, and the third thing I will tell you is definitely inspired by all of your recommendations on liberating structures that can be used. And I'm envisioning using these when we bring that, hopefully they take my recommendation of building a coalition, right? So co-create the change, and then using liberating structures as a means to bring everybody together and build trust within the groups, because I think that's going to be really, really important. And you do that through, more engaging conversations, right? Making it feel like everybody's involved in this. And so I'm inspired by a lot of the liberating structures that have been thrown out there as ideas, one of which is Triz is actually my favorite. And it's my favorite because you can be as sarcastic as you want to be. And with some of the morale issues, right, Trish could be like a breath of fresh air, right? Like how, Jeremy, I think you said, how do we not turn this into a shit show, right? Or how can we turn it into a shit show? What's the best way to, completely wreck this thing? And so I'm inspired by all three of those things. So thank you all very much.
Cool. Our pleasure, Rob. Sherry had a question in the chat. What's the distinction between 15% solutions and min specs? Kathy, do you feel like fielding that?
With the min specs, you have everyone list all of the things that you could need. And there's a great example on the Liberating Structure's website of what it is. So like they have a list of the things that you need in order to have a successful meeting. So you have your goal. Your goal is we need to have a successful meeting. What are all the things we need to do in order to have a successful meeting? And so the list has these things like you need to have a great speaker come in, you need to have a detailed agenda, but those are not min specs. The min specs are you need a time and you need to let people know that it's happening. Like those are your min specs to have a successful meeting. There are other things you can do, but if you don't let people know there's a meeting, it's not going to happen. Now that's min specs. I haven't done 15%. So if anybody wants to share what 15% solutions is, that would be awesome.
Has anybody got that one on the tip of their tongue?
So I've gone through them, and the short version of it is it's like you're exploring a problem area, and at the very end, you attempt as a group to determine what is the one thing, how can we take 15% a step forward, right? To be able to get some big benefits. What is your 15% solution? Not 80, not 90. What's 15%? What is that small thing, that small step that we can take towards a positive outcome?
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
just
cool.
remembered the 15% is in a large organization, all we can ever influence is we have 15% influence as a person, and we can't influence the whole thing, but what can we personally undertake to make something happen? That's what I understood it meant. Yeah, thanks for that. You reminded me, Rob. Thanks.
Yeah,
Sure.
and recently I was looking at those two, and it was a big change that the organization needs to get behind. So that's why I went with min specs instead of 15%, because 15% was just putting more on the individuals who were there when what they really needed was the support of the organization. So.
Yeah.
Shout out to, before I know we're going to move on, and I gave my thank yous, but special shout out to Sherry for your incredible note taking. Thank you so much.
Oh, all right. Well, thanks, Rob, for your help request. Does anybody else got one?
Yeah.
Cool. We'll have to keep our time boundaries a bit tighter.
Yeah.
Let's go for it.
Well, it's just haven't prepared this, but next week Friday I'm having a meeting to design a session with a client, and it's about what I'm doing is I'm devising with them a new organization structure, and I've done a first version, and I want to do now a second version of that. So part of it we already have. So I think the challenge for me is to really involve them, so what we have now is a bunch of post-its from the first kind of workshop, and now it's for version 2 to iterate on that to get a better version of it. Now there's so the challenge is I have to kind of fit the roles which we made also into their overall process. So I was kind of triggered by Rob's example, because he was talking about a customer journey, and I think their overall process is not really clear to them also. So lots of things. I don't know. I'm just going to stop here for questions concerning the time. Probably it will be more clear to me and you if you ask questions.
Awesome. Clarifying questions, gang. Well, Susan, I think you're on mute.
I wasn't giving a participating comment. I was just reading out loud.
Sorry to put you on blast like that. Cool. One question, just for the sake of clarification. So it sounds like you have put in you've created some form of like prototype of organizational design. You've got an artifact,
Yeah,
and you want to get some feedback and engagement from them.
exactly. Yeah, it's based on holacracy, which is a framework I use. So I've got the one artifact, and I want to involve them in getting it to a second version. Yeah.
When you say enforce as part of a challenge, is that, I'm honing in on that word enforce. Could you add a little context to what that means?
Excuse me, can you repeat the word?
Sure. I'm looking at the challenge, which is to enforce them to iterate. Could you add a little more context around what you mean by enforce?
Oh, did I use that word, enforce? I use involve them. I want to involve them to get it to a next level.
Inform.
Yeah, involve them. So actually it means it's a team of 14 people. Yeah. So not enforce, involve. So it's a team of 14 people, and they are having the feeling that the organization structure is not clear to them, and that's really bothering them. So it's a very sensitive thing, and they have a lot of tension around that. So I want to make it as as transparent as possible. At the same time, also the manager actually needs to take some decisions. So there's a tension between involvement, but also the manager does have to make some decisions. So they, in the end, I don't know if that's clear.
Much clearer, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I have a question. How comfortable is the manager with proposals coming from the floor rather than him having to come up with a solution?
But that's a tension, yes. So he's like, he's aware of it, but I think because, for instance, he made his own version already of all the roles. And I told him, well, you know, I'm going to use that as input, but not as something which it's going to be input, but it's not like we're going to copy and paste your thing, because that's not the idea. I really want to use your stuff as input.
Right.
So
so you're feeling he's open to having others create or
yeah, he's open. Yes, definitely, because that was also my assignment. So he is open. Only subconsciously, probably there's some work for him to do. But he told me that he's open.
Thank you.
And Sherry had a question earlier in the chat as well. What are the stickies that mean most to you?
Stickies that mean most to me. What do you mean by that? You mean the stickies? So we've got stickies from roles, the possible new roles within the team. Trying to understand the question.
So those stickies for possible new roles in the team, what can you describe the process that you followed to create those?
Yeah, good question. So I asked them to have a journal of what they were doing over several weeks, and so we got all that information written on stickies. Like, for instance, I manage a database. Okay, so manage database went on a sticky, and then we grouped those stickies together, and a group of those stickies together we combine into a role. So it's a method of bottom up creating a new organization structure, regardless of what's already there. So it's a kind of a new yeah, it's a parallel structure. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. And are these virtual meetings or in person?
This is going to be in person.
What's the manager's input so far?
Yeah, he's got a set of roles in an Excel file, which is very detailed. But I urged him to be open to the group process, that something else might come out, not has to come out actually, because otherwise he might as well do it himself. And he really wants to involve the team.
Yeah, and it looked like you were about to gearing up to.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the the manager itself will be part of the meeting.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you just answered the question as well.
Definitely.
Any other clarifying questions, or are we ready to consult? Considering we've got 15 minutes, let the consultation started. So Marco, mute, webcam off, and we'll talk amongst ourselves. So what do we think?
Somehow I think that starting with a blank sheet rather than with somebody else's ideas might be a safe bet. And I think I like Triz, and I think start off with what would be the worst case scenario, and then work back might be a nice way of doing it. That way the manager could get to hear how things really are from the floor, rather than some validation of his understanding. Yeah, I like the idea of the fishbowl consultation, Sherry. Good idea.
And an alternative in line with that jumped out to me earlier was the celebrity interview. Might also be an interesting way. And what those both sort of have in common is like receiving some amount of information, either in this like generate questions, town hall type fashion, or in a more spontaneous conversation, and then generating some questions for that group. But what they have in common is first receive some information either from somebody who's an expert or a group of people, and then discuss it and come back with additional questions for that group to work with. Anybody else?
I wonder about the design storyboards. I'm curious if anyone has used that. I haven't. What I'm curious about this is you've got these roles identified, just brainstorming with all of these sticky notes, and like what's missing. So I feel like maybe a design storyboard process might help figure out, oh, that's not, that really needs to be two things, or we're completely missing this part. And then eco cycles is my new favorite thing. So like figuring out what's the whole cycle of all the different things at your organization, and what's missing through all of these pieces. And I feel like it's going to need to be, I hope that there's the energy to do multiple steps with this, with getting together, because it's going to take a lot of time to do this well, and you're going to need change management on board to be successful.
So I'm going to add on to that. One thing that's jumping out at me that is very effective and that I've done several times this past year is having an independent facilitator, right? Somebody who can be there to facilitate the group through, right? As a sort of a process facilitator to get them toward their outcome. The other thing that's very influential to me in these situations is to leverage those of you who are familiar with Crucial Conversations, right? And the lessons that come from that book, right? Around how to read the room and understand where crucial conversations might be starting to emerge, and have the facilitator who's skilled in something like that ensure that people are staying engaged, that they're staying in dialogue, etc. And I'm saying that because I am anchoring to the tension that Marco had mentioned. So an independent facilitator who's unbiased, that everybody would agree to, is very helpful, and also leveraging the learnings in effective dialogue and crucial conversations.
Thanks, Rob. And building on that, I think there's a lot of tools in the Deep Democracy Toolkit that might be sort of helpful towards that. One of the, oh, man, this is going to be hard to explain. So Deep Democracy, big book, toolkit, blah, blah, blah. But the specific aspect of what are the roles that are sort of available in the room. And by roles, what they mean are what are the dynamics that are at play. Like, so to either have some form of parking lot where people can just like at random walk up and describe and like put a dynamic that they see actively in the room, or to do a specific reflection, like just do a 1, 2, 4 all at some point and ask everybody to gather all of the different dynamics, just so that you can sort of see, all right, what's in the explicit layer, what do we see visibly, what's sort of like in the undercurrent in the room. Anybody else? And since the roles is on the topic, social network webbing. So to think about whether you think about in terms of roles or in terms of people, but like to allow people to like visually create some form of network graph, or whether you use something along the lines of what in God's name is it, like domain-based engineering practice, but like to describe the flow of work visually and see literally what is missing. Like if you could create the artifact for your own flow or the theoretical flow, or ask the group to visualize that, and then to step back and start with maybe, what comes up to me is maybe start with what do we have right now? And then to add that crucial question, what is missing? What is it that we would like to connect in a tighter and more integral way? Could be a great way of defining those roles and to envision what else is required.
Just curious also about the impact on existing roles and how people are going to feel about that, the changes that are going to happen to them, so that they can actually express that. And I'm wondering also about is it called the 2010, where people come up with their suggestions and then you quickly send them around the room, and everybody then stops and then rates them, and then you choose the ones which are the top, get the top rating, because it's a great way of making it not invisible who said what, and also being very allowing the quiet, certain voices to be heard that probably wouldn't dare say it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Annette, for that comment, especially about how people will be effective. One particular structure that jumps out that might be helpful for that conversation is grief or transition walking. That looks like a spiral journal plus a bit of a sort of sharing exercise. So the 4 questions are, see if I can do this off the top of my head. While it is true that ... So this might be my sentiment on the implication, or on the change itself. And I will always remember. No, I don't remember the questions at all. Put it right there. They're on the website. There's 4 questions around grief or transition walking that might be a good way to metabolize some of those feelings that folks have. And I've done it both virtually and in person, and it's quite a powerful and sort of cathartic exercise along that route. And does anybody have anything else? And I will invite Marco to come back and to tell us what he takes away from this consultation.
Yeah, thanks all. It's really awesome to get all this advice, this consultation from you. Actually, I really don't know where to start because it's such a lot of things, and it's all very valuable. Let's see. If I think a few things, like, first of all, my insight is that it's very good to see the impact of transitioning, of doing this roles exercise, because of course there are current roles now and there will be new roles after that. So it looks like it's kind of an inventory, but it's also an emotional implication that is involved. So I was really, this comment is really helpful, because I tend to be kind of mechanically focused till now. So thank you very much for that insight. And I love all the things that I heard. Some things that particularly I think is good for me, the Deep Democracy Toolkit. Yes, I am familiar with that. It's really good to be reminded of that, especially when it's emotional and when there are feelings involved, to see the undercurrent. Let's see. I'm going to find out also this about the crucial conversation. I like that part also. I think it's connected to deep democracy. So that's for me in the same space of noticing the dialogue, noticing what's happening in the feeling space. So that's good. I'm going to check out some of the things. What I also like, the question is what is missing. I think that is actually the crucial question I want to base the second version on. So thanks for highlighting that. Yeah, and I'm going to check out this ego cycle. So thank you for that. So it's kind of very rich, very rich. So I'm very grateful for getting all your feedback. Yeah. I'm just looking at the time now. It's not I'm not facilitator, but at the same time, I do want to respect everybody's time.
Excellent. And Sherry had a question if anybody had mentioned Triz. Of course, because it's always the best. Probably.
Yeah, I wrote that down. Yeah, certainly. And yeah.
And there is, I hope, a link to transition walking. The 4 questions, which I was able to Google very quickly, are yes, it is true that ... It is hard because I will always remember and never forget. And now that I have shared my grief, it may be possible to. And those are the 4 questions in a spiral journal around transition walking. So what I would like to do is thank you guys for hanging out and offering your insight, being the wise crowd today. We do this every Monday, except for the first Monday of the month. Then we do a different format called the Think Slow Dojo. So I appreciate you guys' time, attention, and energy, and hope to see you back the next time.
Thanks a lot.
Make the curve. Thank you.